The cold steel shackles bit into her wrists, their unyielding grip a stark reminder of her fate. Solara, once a proud warrior of the Zinthari, now sat in the darkened cell of an alien warship, her luminous golden eyes filled with bitter resentment. The betrayal still burned in her chest, hotter than any plasma blade. Her own people had abandoned her, sold her to the highest bidder like nothing more than a pawn. The doors to her cell hissed open, and she tensed, expecting yet another cruel interrogator. Instead, a figure stepped in, taller than most, clad in armor, but with a face unlike any she had seen before. A human. She had heard of them. The Zinthari spoke of humanity in hushed whispers, creatures of myth, defiant and relentless, always pushing against the odds. But this one, his eyes weren't filled with malice. They held something strange, something that confused her. Compassion. "I'm not here to hurt you," the man said, his voice steady yet kind. "My name's Ethan." He hesitated, glancing at the bindings around her wrists. "I'm here to get you out," she scoffed, pulling against her chains. "Why? Do you think me some helpless creature in need of saving?" Her voice was sharp, but it wavered at the edges. Hope was a dangerous thing. Ethan crouched, his expression calm. "No, I think you're someone who doesn't deserve to be in a cage." She searched his face, looking for deception, but found none. Only a stubborn resolve. The warship rumbled as an explosion echoed through the corridors. Ethan flinched, but remained focused. "That's my team. We're getting out of here." She narrowed her eyes. "And why risk yourself for me?" A small smirk formed on his lips. "Because humans don't leave people behind." Something in her chest tightened at those words. With a flick of his wrist, Ethan produced a small device and pressed it against her cuffs. A sharp beep sounded, followed by a metallic click. The shackles released, and Solara's hands were free for the first time in weeks. She flexed her fingers, barely believing it. Ethan stood and extended a hand. "Can you fight?" A slow, predatory smile spread across her lips. "Oh, you have no idea." She took his hand and surged to her feet, her warrior instincts roaring back to life. They burst into the corridor, alarms blaring and red lights flashing across the steel walls. Ethan tossed her a plasma dagger he had strapped to his belt. The moment her fingers wrapped around the hilt, she felt whole again. A pair of alien guards rounded the corner, tall, reptilian Brakthar enforcers armed with pulse rifles. Solara didn't hesitate. She moved like liquid fire, darting between them, her blades slicing through armor and scales. A heartbeat later, the guards collapsed, and she was already moving forward. Ethan whistled. "Remind me not to get on your bad side." She smirked. Smart human. They made their way through the ship, cutting down anyone in their path. Ethan's team had done their part well. Most of the security forces were already occupied with the chaos they had unleashed. As they neared the hangar bay, Solara hesitated. "Ethan," she said, her voice uncharacteristically soft. "My people left me to rot here." She swallowed. "Why didn't yours?" Ethan looked at her, his expression unreadable for a moment before he spoke. "Because love isn't just about blood or species. It's about choice. And I choose to fight for those who deserve it." Something inside her cracked open at his words. For the first time in her life, she felt something other than duty or vengeance. She felt free. As they boarded the waiting ship, Solara glanced at Ethan, a silent promise forming in her heart. She would stand with him, fight with him, because for the first time, she had something worth fighting for. The ship's engines roared to life as Ethan guided it through the hangar bay's force field into the vast expanse of space. The stars stretched endlessly beyond them, but the heavy weight in Solara's chest hadn't yet lifted. Freedom was a strange thing. After so many years of servitude, of duty, of betrayal, it felt fragile. She sat in the co-pilot's seat, staring at the control panels even though she didn't fully understand human technology. The soft glow of the screens reflected in her golden eyes. Ethan's hands moved deftly across the controls, guiding them through enemy fire as their stolen ship twisted and rolled to avoid incoming blasts. The hull groaned as plasma bolts struck the shields, but he remained focused. His team's voices crackled through the comms. "Ethan, we're clear, jumping to FTL in 10 seconds. You better not be late to the party." Ethan grinned, toggling the thrusters. "Wouldn't dream of it." He shot a glance at Solara. "Hold on." With a deep hum, the ship's drive engaged, and the stars outside blurred into streaks of white as they leaped into faster-than-light travel. The sudden shift pressed Solara into her seat, but she barely noticed. Her mind was elsewhere. She exhaled slowly, rubbing her wrists where the shackles had been. The phantom pain lingered. Ethan must have noticed because he leaned back in his seat and crossed his arms. "You okay?" Her head snapped toward him, eyes narrowing. "Why do you care?" He sighed, shaking his head. "You keep asking that like it's a trick question." "Because it doesn't make sense." She studied him. Humans are not known to involve themselves in the affairs of other species without reason. "I am not one of your own. My people." She hesitated, her throat tightening. "They abandoned me. Sold me." Her fingers curled into fists. "And yet you risked your life for mine." Ethan held her gaze. "Because it was the right thing to do." Solara scoffed, but it lacked the usual venom. "That is a foolish philosophy. The galaxy does not reward those who act on right and wrong. It rewards those who survive." Ethan leaned forward, resting his elbows on the console. "You survived, didn't you?" She frowned. "Because of you." "No," he corrected gently. "Because you fought. Because you didn't break. I just gave you the chance." Solara stared at him, something unfamiliar twisting in her chest. She had fought. She had refused to surrender. But no one had ever acknowledged it before. The Zenthari had always treated her victories as obligations, not choices. The silence stretched between them before Ethan broke it with a chuckle. "You really are something else," he said, shaking his head. She arched a brow. "Is that an insult?" He smirked. "Nah, just an observation." The ship's autopilot engaged, leaving them a moment to breathe. Ethan stood and stretched before gesturing toward the back. "Come on. You probably need food and rest. My team's got supplies." Solara hesitated. She was still adjusting to the idea that she was no longer a prisoner. No longer bound. No longer alone. She rose to her feet and followed him. The crew was waiting in the ship's common area, a mismatched band of humans and aliens, all of them battered but alive. A woman with short red hair grinned at Ethan. "You made it. We were taking bets on whether or not you'd get yourself shot." Ethan rolled his eyes. "Glad to know I inspire confidence." A burly man with cybernetic arms snorted. "It's not about confidence, boss. It's about statistics." The crew laughed, and even Solara felt the tension in her shoulders eased just a fraction. She wasn't used to this. Casual banter, camaraderie. Then the red-haired woman turned to her. "So, you're the one we risked our necks for." Solara tensed. "I did not ask for your help." The woman shrugged. "Didn't need to. Ethan's got a bad habit of picking up strays." "Hey," Ethan protested. "She's not a stray. She's a warrior." Solara's lips parted slightly. No one had called her that in a long time. The woman folded her arms. "All right, warrior. You planning to stick around, or was this just a one-time rescue?" The question caught her off guard. Was she staying? Could she? She had no home to return to. No people to fight for. But as she glanced at Ethan, at the crew laughing and arguing like family, she realized something. She had a choice. And for the first time in her life, she wasn't bound by duty or betrayal. She was free. A slow smile formed on her lips. "I think I'll stick around." The crew exchanged glances, then nodded as if it was already decided. Ethan grinned. "Welcome to the family." For the first time, Solara believed it. Solara still wasn't sure what to make of this family she had stumbled into. The crew of Ethan's ship, the Nomad, was unlike any unit she had ever served with. There was no rigid hierarchy, no fear-driven obedience, just a strange, effortless rhythm between them. They bickered, laughed, and watched each other's backs in a way that felt more genuine than anything she had known among her own kind. But trust was not something she gave freely. As the ship glided through FDL, Solara found herself wandering the dimly lit corridors, her mind restless. She had spent too long in a cell, her body stiff from weeks of captivity, and movement was the only thing keeping her from feeling caged again. She ended up in the weapons bay, drawn by the familiar scent of plasma coils and sharpened steel. Rows of rifles, sidearms, and blades lined the walls, primitive by Zenthari standards, but well-maintained. She ran her fingers over the hilt of a combat knife, feeling its weight. It wasn't the elegant weaponry of her people, but there was something honest about it. "You keep looking at those like they're about to whisper secrets to you," came a voice from behind her. She turned sharply, knife instinctively raised, only to find Ethan leaning against the doorway with an easy grin. He had changed out of his combat gear into something more casual, just a simple black shirt and cargo pants. He looked more like a rogue smuggler than the soldier who had cut through Brakthar guards just hours ago. "You move too quietly for a human," she muttered, lowering the knife. "Part of the job," he replied, stepping inside. "Figured I'd find you here. Thought you might want something better than a stolen dagger." She gave him a pointed look. "The blade you gave me worked fine." Ethan crossed his arms. "Yeah, but we've got better. You fight like someone who's been trained since birth. You deserve a weapon that fits you." His words sent a strange warmth through her, but she shoved it aside. She wasn't here for praise. Still, curiosity got the better of her as he reached into a storage crate and pulled out a sleek, black plasma-forged short sword. Unlike most human weapons, this one had a balance she recognized, a warrior's weapon. He handed it to her without hesitation. She took it, giving it a few experimental swings. The blade hummed softly as it cut through the air, the weight perfect in her grip. It wasn't Zinthari, but it was close enough. "This," she said, testing the balance, "is acceptable." Ethan chuckled. "High praise coming from you." Solara eyed him. "And what do you expect in return?" Ethan frowned. "Why do you think I expect something?" "Because that is how the galaxy works," she said bluntly. "Nothing is given freely." Ethan studied her for a long moment, then exhaled. "Solara, look, I get it. You've been burned. Badly. But that's not how we do things here." She narrowed her eyes. "Then why?" "Because you're one of us now," he said simply. "That's what family does." The word family felt foreign in her mind. She had never had one. She turned away, focusing on the blade in her hands. "We'll see." Ethan didn't push. He just gave a knowing smirk. "Yeah, we will." Before she could question him further, the ship's intercom crackled to life. "Ethan, we've got a situation," came the voice of the red-haired woman. "Tessa, the ship's pilot." Ethan sighed. "Of course we do." He tapped his earpiece. "What kind of situation?" "The kind with bounty hunters," Tessa replied. "We just dropped out of FTL, and I've got 3 ships on sensors, all locking weapons." Solara's grip on the sword tightened. Ethan gave her a look that was equal parts exasperation and amusement. "Guess the universe isn't ready to let us breathe just yet." She smirked. "Good. I was getting bored." They sprinted toward the bridge as the Nomad shook under the impact of a distant explosion. This was the part she understood. The part that made sense. Fighting was simple. But something told her that, for the first time, she wasn't just fighting to survive. She was fighting for something more. And that scared her far more than any enemy ever could. The Nomad rocked under another impact as Ethan and Solara burst onto the bridge. The forward viewport displayed 3 sleek, predatory vessels circling them like hungry wolves. Their dark hulls bore the sigil of the Iron Maw, a ruthless mercenary syndicate known for hunting high-value bounties. Tessa's fingers danced over the controls, her expression tense. "They're hailing us." Ethan exhaled sharply. "Put them through." The screen flickered to life, revealing a scarred, cybernetic-faced alien with cold, metallic eyes. His lips curled into a predatory grin. "Captain Ethan Carter," the bounty hunter purred. "And an unexpected prize, Zinthari deserter Solara. Your heads will fetch a fine sum." Solara stepped forward, eyes blazing. "I am no deserter." The bounty hunter chuckled. "The Zinthari don't care. You're a loose end. And the Brakthar?" He leaned forward. "They want you both, dead or alive. Frankly, dead is easier." Ethan smirked. "Well, that's just rude." Without another word, he cut the transmission and turned to Tessa. "Shields, 30% and dropping. Engines, not fast enough to outrun them." Solara's gaze flicked over the tactical readout. 3 ships. Too many guns. No escape. Unless. She grabbed Ethan's arm. "What's our most powerful weapon?" Ethan blinked. We've got torpedoes, but they'll see them coming. Not if we detonate them manually." Inside their formation, Tessa's eyes widened. "You're suggesting we launch ourselves into their fleet with a bomb?" Solara grinned. "Yes." The crew exchanged glances, then Ethan let out a short laugh. "I like her." He turned to the others. "All right, we overload the torpedo's core, launch it, and then punch it straight through their formation before it detonates. If we're lucky, we'll be clear before the blast hits." Tessa cracked her knuckles. "I love stupid plans." The ship shuddered as another blast rocked the hull. No time to debate. Ethan ran to the weapons console, manually arming the torpedo while Solara monitored the enemy movements. The bounty hunters were closing in for the kill. Ready? Ethan called. Solara's heart pounded. Not from fear. From exhilaration. Do it. Ethan slammed the launch button. The torpedo streaked out, straight toward the enemy flagship. Now, he shouted. Tessa yanked the controls, sending the Nomad into a near-suicidal dive between the enemy ships. Plasma fire filled the space around them, missing by meters. Then, boom. The torpedo exploded, a blinding white light engulfing the enemy vessels. The shockwave slammed into the Nomad, sending them spinning. Alarms blared. Solara clutched the console as gravity failed for a split second. Then, silence. The ship steadied. The viewport cleared. Where there had once been 3 enemy ships, only debris remained. The crew let out a collective breath. Tessa hooped. That was insane. Let's do it again. Ethan laughed, shaking his head. Let's not. He turned to Solara. That was your idea, and it was brilliant. Solara met his gaze. I told you, I am a warrior. He smiled. That you are. For a moment, the bridge was quiet. Then Ethan tilted his head. You're staying, aren't you? Solara glanced around. The battered ship, the grinning crew, the feeling in her chest she couldn't quite name. She had been betrayed. She had been bound. But for the first time, she had chosen to fight for something other than survival. She smirked. I suppose I am. Ethan clapped a hand on her shoulder. Welcome home. And for the first time in her life, home didn't feel like a prison. It felt like freedom.